Happy Disability Pride Month. My name is Kajari Chaudhary, and I serve as the Deputy Commissioner of Community Relations Bureau at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. And it is my absolute honor to welcome you to the panel discussion stage of the 6th Annual Disability Unite Festival. A quick description: I am a South Asian woman with short, wavy hair, gray and black hair, and wearing a gray polo with the logo of the agency in black letters on my left. Today we gather under the banner Love Unites and on the milestone of the 35th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA is a landmark federal promise that is the floor on which we build. So here in New York City, we believe love and justice must travel farther than federal minimums, and the disability protections under the New York City Human Rights Law exactly delivers that. The New York City Human Rights Law stands as one of the strongest civil rights protections in the nation. Here at the Commission, our work is grounded in the belief that accessibility and equity are human rights, and it is through education and advocacy that we achieve a more inclusive New York City for all. The Disability Unite Festival, with the bold theme of Love Unites, not only uplifts the voices of people with disabilities, but also connects people to essential resources to foster a stronger, more unified city. So when we say Love Unites, we mean, regardless of shifting winds, you are covered, valued, and protected in the city. Accessibility is not an add on, it is the starting point of equity. Our collective progress is measured not only in curb cuts and captions, but the overall enjoyment of rights on equal terms and conditions to live, work, and thrive in the city. Today's panel conversations will push us from compliance to community, from minimum standards to maximum solidarity. You'll hear from advocates, artists, entrepreneurs, and experts who prove every day that when we center leadership of people with disabilities, we all move forward together. On behalf of the Commission, thank you for bringing your knowledge, lived experience, and yes, your love to this festival. Let's translate that love into bold ideas, shared resources, and policies that leave no one behind. Enjoy the panels and remember, disability rights are civil rights anchored in law and woven into our community. Thank you.
My name is Christina Sparrow. I'm a Black woman in my 50s. I'm wearing a head wrap and glasses, and I identify as she, her.
My name is John Johnson. I am a African American male in my 60s. I have a black T-shirt on that says "Brothers Like Us," and looking forward to this discussion.
My name is Ewan Fan. I'm a Chinese woman in my 30s, and I have black hair. I'm wearing a light brown shirt with black dots on them. Yeah, and I'm also very excited to have this conversation.
And my name is Miguel Ramos. I am a Hispanic male. I am wearing a white collar shirt, gold tie, and I'm really excited to be here. So, Miguel Ramos, I have 20 plus years in various human services experience. I've worked with individuals with various forms of disabilities, more children. I've worked with adults that have been the abuser in intimate partner violence. So the abusive partner intervention. I've worked and supported survivors of domestic violence. I've assisted families learn parenting skills, what's called parenting journey, teens that are about to become parents, and that dynamic, working with them. I've worked with individuals with anger management, whether it was mandated or they self um, disclosed and chose to want to go into that and work on themselves. With healthy families is primarily with individuals that were being released from being incarcerated and they wanted to reintegrate one way or another with their families if they could, or at the very least develop a relationship where they can maybe not go and live in the same home, but at the very least reestablish some sort of a relationship with their family, as well as a social resilience model, which has been with individuals who have experienced some level of trauma and how they can regulate and notice what's going on inside of them so that they can process either releasing distress or identifying what's going on so they'll know that, yes, this is something I can work on and I can do, or I need further assistance and help. The Narcan training, of course, for those individuals that um, either have friends or family members or just want training on how to use Narcan, as well as those individuals that are abusing substances and they need to carry a Narcan kit on them in the event that they see someone overdosing, they can apply it, or God forbid, they themselves are overdosing. Somebody can go in their pocket, grab it, and reverse the overdose. I am also a mental health first aid certified instructor and trained by the city of New York. And I have done quite a few trainings with mental health first aid for adults, youth, seniors, veterans. I myself am a veteran. Also for the Spanish community, especially with a lot of migrants that are coming into the city. I know a lot of individuals focus only on the Hispanic migrants that are coming in, but there are a lot of migrants from many other countries that you don't see or hear that they're being announced in the news. They're not making the headlines, but a lot of things are happening to them as well. And a lot of things that they went through to be able to come here to find out that now they're living in terror. So in those areas, those are my expertise. A lot of the cases that I do get for the individuals that cause harm in intimate partner violence, they're court mandated. And that's part of an ATI. In other words, they either take the program if the judge orders them, takes the program, or they can be incarcerated. It's an option. And you have those that'll say, no, Mr. Ramos, thank you. I would rather, go up north and it's okay. And I tell them it's okay. But then, it's an alternative rather than incarcerating someone for whatever situation. And it depends case by case. And with that, I guess I'm checked in.
Yeah. Yeah. In the interest of being brief, I'm just gonna really just give you a quick summation of who I am. My name is John, as I said, John Johnson. I'm a New York City resident, and I've had a bunch of jobs from working with youth services, from director of a Boys and Girls Club to teaching in every borough of New York City. And after that, I worked with Bill Clinton and his first stint as president, and I also worked with Jesse Jackson. But my main focus now is working with people that live with mental health challenges. I indeed am a peer. I was diagnosed with a mental health challenge a long time ago. I'm not going to say how long, but I've been living, I think, successfully with the diagnosis. And I began working with NAMI about 7 years ago. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I've done a bunch of work with them from In Our Own Voice, which is where I go to schools and I tell my story, and I kind of share with students about killing the stigma, also ending the silence I do, and also a program I'm doing now in the Black and Brown community is called Sharing Hope, which I call a community conversation, where I go in and open up the conversation about mental health and mental illness, and just kind of get the discussion going. And it's a three-part series where I tell my story. The second one, we bring in a clinician. The third part, we give out resources to the community. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of who I am and what I've done. Looking forward to the questions that are going to be posed.
I guess I'll go. Hello, my name is Ewan Fan, and I came to the United States when I was 17, so I can say I'm immigrant. And I'm always confused about if I'm like the immigrant or first generation, probably like half generation. So I was always interested in psychology. So then I studied, and then I became a licensed mental health counselor. And a school counselor at the same time, because I studied both. And then my first job was being a school counselor at the Flushing International High School. So in those 3 years, being a school counselor in a lower socioeconomical level school, and with not many, all students were recent immigrants, because our school only take immigrant students who were in the United States for less than 4 years, and regardless of documentation status. So I witnessed a lot of trauma and a lot of just unawareness from the kid themselves and from the parents in mental health. Like mental health is kind of the last thing in their mind, which I don't blame them, because if you're trying to survive, you're trying to put meals on the table, you really cannot care too much about, how you're feeling. So, I supported students through counseling, through running groups, through outreach, through doing advocacy for them during those 3 years as a school counselor. And after that, I feel my true passion is still with doing mental health counseling, doing therapy. So then I became a therapist with a psychiatrist, like in a psychiatric clinic in Queens. And in those 3 years as a therapist, I worked a lot with also new Chinese immigrants, but I also had the experience of working with a wide range of diagnoses. They range from, let's say, mild depression to very severe psychosis. So I accumulated a lot of experiences there, and really saw the huge need in the immigrant community for mental health, and the lack of awareness too. Like that, I think I will mention that many times today later, because it's just the lack of awareness is really huge, and I feel that will make all the difference if we can change that. So then, after being a community therapist for another 3 years, then I became a solo therapist myself. Then quickly, I founded Riverbank Psychotherapy in New York. So now we're in group practice. We now have 4 therapists. We are all Chinese. We're all Chinese Mandarin speaking, and we mostly support college students, primarily Asian and Chinese, and also some young professionals who were college students and who just got their first job in this new country. So now the main diagnosis I work with would be like perfectionism, trauma with family members, a lot of anxiety and depression. So that's my main work now, but with college students and young adults. So that's my introduction.
So this is Christina Sparrow. So I'm a certified public accountant by profession, and a mental health advocate, and I live with bipolar disorder. I'm the founder of New York City Mental Health Collective, a grassroots organization that is raising awareness on mental health to normalize it in New York City. Too often people look at people who live with mental health conditions as dangerous. And for a fact, I know I'm not dangerous. I'm just a human being who has issues, just like anybody has issues. and I'm working to normalize it and to raise awareness for people to get help of all backgrounds because mental health is in all of us. As the New York City Mental Health Collective, I had my second mental health Mayo town hall, which was very successful, and I'm happy. I'm also the founder of the Person-Centered Intervention Training Response Program. It's a non-police, peer-run crisis response program where peers respectfully engage with people who are well, who are becoming unwell or in crisis to divert them from incarceration or like over hospitalization. It's important that we have peers who are experts in the space to be able to talk to people who look, walk, and talk like us because it's like we're just people. And so I also trained in the CIT training, which is crisis intervention training, where I trained law enforcement officers on best practices and de-escalations and crisis communications when dealing with people in crisis. And I think that kind of sums it up. So our first question is, how do race, ethnicity, gender, or social economic status further complicate the intersections of mental health and disability? I'll take that question. So this is a critical question because race, gender, social economic status, and disability intersects the shapes of mental health experience, especially for Black people and Black women in our communities. Black people face systemic barriers in mental health care, such as misdiagnosis, stigma, lack of access to culturally competent providers. When disability is added to the picture, the challenges are magnified. Disabled Black people are often encounter both racism and ableism, which can lead to being misunderstood, underserved, or even criminalized in public systems such as healthcare, housing, employment, education, and law enforcement. For Black women in particular, it's even more layered. We are often the caretakers, the emotionally strong person, self-sacrificing themselves, and we're labeled the strong Black woman. And if we come up too strong, we're labeled the angry Black woman, which we're not. We're just going through a lot of pressure, and we're definitely misunderstood. And for that reason, we don't always get treatment and help because it leads to underdiagnosis and inadequate care because people are telling us to be strong. And so we're trying to internalize it and to stay strong. And if we can't care for the vulnerable, and also when we think about poverty, many of us people in our color, we live in poverty, so we don't have access. We have limited access to mental health services when not in communities. Sometimes the services are outside. You have like health deserts where you may have to travel a bus to the train to get to some places and you won't be able to have access to it, or even bring even a daycare. Who's going to provide services for my child if I can't get the help? What am I going to do? Um, so when we talk about mental health and disability in African American communities, we have to use the intersectional lens. It's not just about the individual care, it's about transforming the systems themselves to make it more equitable, inclusive, and rooted in the real experience of people they serve.
So when I first see this question, the first thing that popped in my head is just the one thing a lot of Chinese psychiatrists who told me when I was a new therapist, which is when Chinese clients patients come to us, they're already very severe and more severe than maybe other populations, I imagine, from what they told me. I think my guess of why is just in the Chinese community, the awareness is so low. Like when people may be just showing some depression, some anxiety, maybe even some mild hallucinations, like people or family members tend to brush it off and trying to say, oh, it's just a mild illness, it's a phase. And then they don't get any treatment, they just zero awareness. And then hopefully it will just go away without just seeing it. And then they become very severe. Like one extreme case I had when I was working for a psychiatrist was that we had one patient who had pretty severe psychosis, like hallucinations, audio hallucinations, a lot of delusions. But his parents were still trying very hard to put him to work in restaurants, make him find a wife, to marry, have kids. But basically, the traditional Chinese mindset is that if you seem to be abnormal and we put you into the mold, the track of a normal person, then you're fine. So it's so extreme that they really kind of got blind of the person's clear illness. And so that's very heartbroken for me to see. And so that's the first thing I'm thinking. It just for the Chinese community, um, it's very hard for people to actually get care unless they're very, very severe. And another thing I can say is that in my later when I did private practice, I slowly would have some male clients and man clients from like more maybe higher socioeconomical status. And I noticed that it's not just the socioeconomic status that would make it hard for people to seek help. Gender is a big thing too. And in psychotherapy though, in mental health, I think being a man probably makes it harder than a woman to seek help. And I look forward to hearing from Miguel and John. From the male perspective, because as a therapist, I noticed that, or I can only speak for the Chinese community. The Chinese community, I know for Chinese men, it was expected culturally, like in the traditional sense, that a man needs to be super collected and very strong and basically not emotional. But psychotherapy is all about emotional and all about the wounds we have, the trauma we have. And men are not allowed to talk about it. So, and it will be seen as weak and just bad, and again, abnormal, these kind of like negative terms if a man seeks therapy. So I feel particularly for Chinese men to seek therapy, it's also very difficult. And the last thing I want to say is because we work with a lot of university insurances, so we get a lot of college students. And in college students, especially Chinese college students population, oftentimes I witness this very unique internal conflict these students confront when they have to apply for accommodations. When they have, let's say, ADHD or anxiety or depression, one part of them wants to apply for it because it will help them, help their grades, help their mental health, they're less pressured. But on the other part of them doesn't want to apply because for them, apply for it means I'm abnormal, I'm crazy, I'm weak, I'm less than, right? All of those shameful stigma. So so that's a common internal conflict Asian students face when they want to apply for accommodation. So yeah, so these are the things I see a lot in my work experiences, and I just want to say, like in summary, I would say all of these things: race, ethnicity, gender, and especially socioeconomic status. All of these things really, really make it hard for people to seek mental health help, but we all deserve some help.
This is John speaking. All those things that are all determinants of society, right? Socioeconomics, gender, race. Did you realize that when a slave wanted to be free, that was considered a mental illness, right? So we have to think about why Black folks don't want to go. And although that's way back, but there's a certain kind of fear or because Black folks don't want to go to white doctors who are determining certain things, right? In terms of socioeconomics, when a person is acting erratic in an affluent white community, right? What happens is who they call the hospital, but in the Black community, who they call the police. So that is a disparity, and then the whole agenda, how this is that, the whole idea of prenatal care and stuff like that in the Black community. There's a disparity. So there's a lot of things that affect mental health and determinants that we have of our sociology. So all those things come into play when it comes to our mental health and our mental wellness. So I'll just kick it to you, Miguel.
And this is Miguel speaking. I fully agree with what the panel is saying. Language is primary just because of the way people associate the language and internalize certain languages and certain things that are said. they won't seek the help. An example, at a very young age, I'm not sure if how everyone here has I even heard it, but at a very young age, a boy is taught boys don't cry, girls cry, boys don't do this. So at a very young age, you're teaching them to be desensitized to their emotions, their feelings, and that impacts them as they're getting older and going into adulthood. And it really impacts their relationships. But certain race, for instance, in a lot of Spanish cultures, they don't speak about, especially the men, they don't speak about mental health. It is absolutely a sign of weakness. I'm expected to be a provider. I'm expected to always hold it together. I'm expected to always know everything that's going on. I'm expected to work 80 hours a week, come home, and still do everything I have to do. I'm expected to know it all. I cannot be vulnerable. I cannot be weak. I cannot. And once again, all that does is create a chaos inside of a person that finally, if it gets released, it'll get released in a negative way. And instead of having those that are showing up to assist you, they're showing up and they're then adding trauma onto the issues that you already have because they don't understand. They don't get it. I know that it was spoken about how women tend to be more emotionally intelligent than men. Men are trying to get there. They are trying to find a way to be able to become emotionally intelligent and erase everything that they were taught about. Hold your emotions, don't cry, don't let it out. Don't. It is extremely hard. It is extremely hard because then what if I have my partner? Here I am trying to emotionally and mentally heal and discharge things that are inside of me. And now I find that my own partner is looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Are you weak? Why are you sharing so much? Why are you? And then they re-internalize, and it's easier to walk on eggshells. It's easier to walk in silence. It's easier to hold it in, get stressed, and have a heart attack because I didn't know how to speak. I didn't know how to discharge. And if I can't speak to my partner, I really don't want to speak to a clinician, someone I don't know. And if it's somebody that it's in my race and I really don't want to speak. I know that John spoke about how some people will go to someone who they'll go to a white doctor. Some individuals will prefer the white doctor thinking they're better educated rather than going to someone in my culture that understands me, that understands what I believe, that understands my religion can be another reason that can stop somebody from seeking the help that they need. Why? I'm not demon possessed. Why? I don't have spirits. Why? Just because I believe certain things does not mean that I don't have a connection with my higher power. But it may be looked upon that way. And it's then if your family looks at it some type of way where if they find out that you're getting services, whether male or female, even if you're at parties, you're that uncle, that brother, that sister that is isolated. You're amongst the group of people, but you're still isolated. You're alone. They don't want to approach you because, oh, that's the one getting mental health services. They must be a little crazy. And they just add on to the stigma. So I would rather walk around with everything that I'm carrying in my heart and inside of me, regardless of how it destroys me, than get help and then, God forbid, one of my family members or neighbors find out about it. Or my religious organization. It is so hard. It is so hard to go and seek help. As I said, there are more men receiving the help, but not by far as many as they should be. Because even when they go in to finally see somebody, the clinician will say they're holding back. They're giving me bits and pieces, and then they just pull everything back. And of course, then there are those that can't afford the service. They'll have insurance that'll tell them you're only authorized for 8 sessions. 8 sessions, you're barely doing an intake or an assessment. So yeah, there are many factors.
Dag, all of this stuff resonates with me. So it's like when you think about like the mental health stigma in our communities, particularly Black communities, I think like when John was talking about it, it's rooted like through slavery and like racism. We go back to like even the Tuskegee studies when they were using Black men for the syphilis studies, and it's like they're thinking they're getting treatment, but they're actually being ex as experiment. And it's just like when you think about even Black women, their bodies are being used to like um as experiments when we're going through a lot of pain through birth and we're not getting like the medication as they give to other folks. And so it's just that on all of that trauma causes this mental health, you know, it's this trauma on top of trauma. And when we walk out the door, people see us as Black. So you could be very happy in your home, but once you walk out that door, we're just Black. I can't say that I could pretend to be white, or I could pretend to be another race. I'm just Black. So if people are racist, they're just going to be racist, and I'm not going to be treated the same, and that causes more emotional harm in me. And also, a lot of times in our community, I know we mentioned earlier, people are misdiagnosed. Was it drapetomania? I think you were mentioning, John, about the slaves running away. That's a mental illness, which is so unfair. Um, an ongoing misdiagnosis and mistreatment is not about the reluctance of getting here. It's structural racism. Where and why, where do we go to get the support? Because we're afraid. In this country, I looked it up, it was only 2% of Black psychiatrists in the United States. We got 13% of Black people here. So where are we going to get our treatment from? So we're going to get a treatment from people mainly outside of our race who may not even know what we think, walk, talk, and think like and have similar experiences. And so like if I'm going to a doctor and I'm like raising my hand, I talk this way, they're gonna be like, oh, well, Christina's aggressive. No, Christina's not aggressive. This is the way she talks is part of her culture, right? And the same thing, it's like, you know, this is why we don't feel safe and supported because no one sees us, validates us, right? And I know even Miguel, you talked about the religion, right? We're taught, like, you know, we taught in the family to pray on it, stay in the house. Even the Black families, don't tell all people what stays in the house stays in the house. And if you go to if you practice certain religions, like, where, you know, I mean, I'm not judging any religion, right? But some people like use sacrifices of animals or whatever, and that's just their religion, right? Or they're speaking in tongue, right? And that's like, I grew up in Pentecostal. If I go to a doctor's office speaking in tongue, they're going to medicate me with all types of stuff. And I understand this is my culture, this is my religion. So now I'm being overdiagnosed, medicated because of my religion. And if even for Black women, it's like we're the backbones of the family. We're holding our men down, we're holding the kids down. It's a lot of pressure on us. And it's so hard to ask for help because it's like we have to, because of the way the system's designed, we're supposed to suffer in silence. Period. Period. And so even when we go to our healthcare professionals, it's like we're dismissed. We experience more trauma from our clinicians sometimes, and it's just really unfair. It's just not a very fair system. So breaking the stigma means like creating a space where Black women could be heard and not feel the judgment. This is how you break the stigma, is making sure that wherever we go, we feel heard, validated, so we can go get the help.
So the second question is, how does mental health stigma differ across communities? And I'm the first one, so I'll go. As I was hearing all your sharings, actually a new thing came to my mind about mental health stigma. Like besides all the stigma we're already talking about, I feel there's this also hidden stigma in especially our minority communities, the communities that aren't very comfortable or have a lot of awareness of mental health or psychotherapy. And I think the stigma is I cannot trust the therapist or the psychiatrist that much, especially if they look like me, because the shame, the stigma, right? In our traditional cultures, it is so looked down upon. It is such a taboo. It's such a bad thing. I noticed some of my female Chinese clients, they insist. And they're from China too. Like their first language is Mandarin, and they insist on speaking only English to me. And there are probably plenty of people who purposely did not choose me because I look Chinese just like them. Because maybe me as a Chinese woman represents all of that judgment, like all the hating, all this criticizing, all of those things, maybe their moms or the environment give to them. So yeah, that's another very hidden stigma I just realized, and that's another kind of roadblock that prevents people from seeking help. Because you're in the wing, right? I cannot get a Chinese therapist, I also do not think a white therapist understand me. Then who do I left with? No one. So I think that's a big roadblock. And another thing I can talk about is since we're talking about cross communities, the stigma, I want to make a distinction between like within the Chinese community, the new immigrants versus the Chinese Americans. Because in my experience, I noticed that these two groups may have very different views regarding mental health. I would say in general, of course, there are individual differences, but I want to say in general, I saw that more Chinese Americans, like people who are born and raised in America, would maybe share more the similar values and the similar level of stigma as the majority of people here. But Chinese immigrants, and it doesn't matter how many years they're in the United States, I feel many of them still hold the very traditional values they carry here from the home country. So it's much more likely for a Chinese immigrant to feel, oh, you're seeking therapy, you must be crazy, you must be insane, or that is a weird thing to say, right? Whereas let's say you're in the community of everybody's Asian American, then you can say, oh, I just talked to my therapist, and then there's no looks or weird remarks. But you may get those in, or you may not even want to say it in the more traditional immigrant community, because you will then get not great treatments. So yeah, so I just want to make that one distinction. Then John?
So yeah, I think stigma is probably one of the biggest deterrents of why people don't get help. I'll just give a quick example. I was the director of a Boys and Girls, one of the directors of a Boys and Girls Club, and we had one of the top Boys and Girls Clubs in the country. And I was working at 4 years, stellar reputation, everything. And then I started doing work with NAMI, and I decided to kind of come out to my bosses and say, hey, I'm doing work with NAMI, and I'm telling my story about living with bipolar. And when I say there was a drastic difference about the way people viewed me before I told them and after. Now, I was the same John, stellar reputation, but little things started happening. Like, if I reprimanded a kid, some of the kind of, oh, is he having a bipolar moment? Or, so they started thinking differently. So therefore, people don't want to come out and say, because of that stigma, there's going to be all kinds of things that are not necessarily true. But so they say, you know what, I'm going to stay underground. I'm not going to tell anybody. But the good thing is now, and I think Miguel talked about a little bit, that people are now coming out more, and it's becoming better, and the stigma is a little less. That when we have celebrities coming out talking about living with mental health challenges, and people, especially after COVID, people started really taking stock in their mental health, saying, wait, what's happening with me? What's happening? And that's a good thing. Kids are now talking. I go into schools, and now we're talking about mental health at an early age. I go into second grade class, and they want me to talk about mental health. You say, well, what do I say? So I say things like, who here has ever been sad? Who have ever been happy? And we talk about emotions and feelings now, which is good, because now that stigma, and we're learning how to care about our brothers and sisters instead of stigmatizing them, and that's a good thing. So, the more people that talk about it, and I think that goes to one of the questions that we have, but more people that talk about that stigma is dropping a little bit, but it's still there. And even if it's not outward, it's not overt, but it's people say, whoa, if I tell someone that I live with, and I always say I live with the diagnosis of bipolar, I'm not bipolar, because that's a diagnosis, right? No one ever says that they're cancer or that they're diabetes. But once you tell someone that of course, it's never a positive thing. They say, "Oh, John got bipolar." Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's usually like, "Whoa, he's gonna kill his whole family." He's talking on the street. There's more people that look like me that live with a mental health challenge than that person. But the media, I'm not sexy. The media portrays those people, and I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but there are more people that that look like me and are doing very well, and although we have our challenges and stuff, but we're killing that stigma now, and we're saying, "Hey, I'm okay," and we're also saying that everybody has some stuff that they're dealing with in their life. This is just something that I have to over. We're all overcomers. We're all dealing with something, and so we got to kill that stigma.
Yeah, this is Miguel. I fully agree. The stigma part is the part that impacts, and you will see it regardless of the person's ethnic background. You see they have their own level of stigma regardless. I mean, yes, to John's point, the US in a sense is in a little better place. I mean, what's that cartoon that came out not so long ago about the emotions?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know what you're talking
Oh,
about.
Inside Out.
Inside Out, yeah.
Inside Out, yeah.
Even part two. So I've worked with little boys that are autistic, and I've been working with them for 12 years. I do that aside from this. So we were able to go see the movie and then come out, and while we're eating nuggets, I'm asking questions. So what was your favorite part and what did you think? And they were able to capture. We need ways that are out of the box to really go against a lot of the stigmas that are out there, because some of the stigmas are not even said. Some of it is just, you know what? They may not be said to me, or the language that's used. Oh no, don't tell anybody that you're going to a therapist because you're going to then do something to the family name. Now it became an issue of the family where I am the one that's ruining the family's image, that image that they have in the community, wherever. So it becomes a problem. Or if a person is going to go, a person from my ethnic background may go get services, he or she may want to go to an office that's in another borough so that they don't run into anybody they know, just out of fear that they're going to run into somebody and then have that person go, "Hey, I saw you going into you know this place counseling and this," then it become then the fear is there. So it is. And then of course a lot of the misdiagnosis where you'll have a child who may have some traumatic events, and then what'll end up happening, they'll stick them with a child that is disabled. Now it has nothing to do with trauma, or they'll take a disabled child and say, "Oh yeah, he has mental health." No, it's disability. It's a physical disability. Their brain is working great. They don't have any emotion, but they'll lump them all together, special ed, and they just throw. Once, of course, there's a financial part to that, but once again, they're lumping them together. I do like the idea that they are starting earlier, to John's point, early intervention, CPSE, before 5 years old. So they're trying to intervene early. But then you have a lot of migrants that are coming from across the border, whatever border they cross, and where they're from, they're not as receptive as those that are here, born here, raised here, and even then they're pushing back. But they're not going to come into another country to get mental health services. They're coming here to work regardless, and they're going to try to push through it, not realizing that they're causing a lot more damage to themselves.
Okay, so what unique challenges do people with mental health disabilities face when trying to self-advocate, especially in spaces that may question their credibility or autonomy?
One of the challenges is understanding that because a person has a mental health diagnosis or something going on within inside of them, it doesn't mean that they're not smart. It doesn't mean that they can't think for themselves. it doesn't mean that they can answer for themselves. It seems that people always tend to want to answer or step in for you when you haven't even asked for that help, because you can fully answer for yourself. You can fully move around for yourself. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of a weakness to a culture. I consider myself a Black Puerto Rican, and I'm very distinct with that. For those that have gone to Puerto Rico, they're fair-skinned Puerto Ricans with blue eyes, and then there are others that are darker, then different shades. But even amongst them, they feel that there is shame and weakness if they declare or if they say they're going through some mental health crisis. It may be temporary. It may be long term that it needs further help. How many women will refuse to go to get mental health assistance after giving birth based on their culture? And if their child is born with a disability, now they're looking at themselves. What did I do wrong for the higher powers to punish me through this happening to my child? There are a lot of stigmas in cultures, within cultures, and in the Hispanic culture or Puerto Rican culture. Just to be clear, I sometimes don't use Hispanic. Spain had the majority of the Taínos, which are the natives from Puerto Rico, as slaves. And when they brought slaves over from Africa, a lot of them stayed and resided in Puerto Rico. And unfortunately, Spain was the main one. So using the phrase Hispanic means that I'm associating with Spain, but no, I'm just a Puerto Rican. And once again, just trying to move forward. But once again, and then of course, if I choose to go to somebody to speak to, a clinician, a therapist, anyone, psychologist, psychiatrist, then I'm really turning my back on my faith. And a lot of people will rather go towards their faith, whether it's lighting a candle in a church, whether they're praying in, at a mosque. What they would rather do that than seek the help, not realizing that they may need both. It doesn't say stop. It doesn't mean stop. What it means, continue and keep advancing. John?
I tell you, one of the biggest issues or problems is disbelief. So if I say I'm not really doing well, I'm not feeling well, a lot of people say, oh, he's making an excuse of why he doesn't want to come to work, or, really that depression really doesn't exist, or, and because someone who does not live with depression or anxiety, they can't necessarily relate. So they say, oh, just get over it. If I could get over it, I would, right? So, that's one of the biggest things. A lot of people don't believe that, mental illness is a factor, is something that really exists. I'm glad now that we're getting the research. My brain is different from your brain and different things like that. They're showing that this is a real thing. This is not something that is fictitious or made up, so, when people say, if I'm depressed or down, I'm like, why are you down? Why? You shouldn't be down or whatever. So the disbelief of people who just cannot relate or don't want to relate or something like that is really is a chore sometimes. And I have to say, I can't be concerned about those people who don't believe that I actually have a diagnosis that's real.
I kind of to answer this question, I was thinking kind of three different rough categories of things I witnessed. I like when a Chinese person, and I'm representing the Chinese community. I'm a Chinese therapist. Just to put it here. Yeah, I've roughly categorized three categories when a person is trying to seek help. One type is actually no awareness. Then that's also a group who will not seek help. And they are suffering a lot, but they just have no awareness. Their family members have no awareness. So just things just get really bad. So, and then another group, I think, is the group we're more talking about here. Miguel and John are talking about. Like people are a little bit aware, like, I feel depressed, I feel anxious, I feel weird. And then they try to seek help, and then they got met with a lot of shaming, a lot of, that's just the phase, you'll get over it, or a lot of minimizing. And some people, like especially in the Chinese community, there's a common response would be, oh, you feel depressed now? Let me tell you, 10 years ago, when I was going through that, it was you should just do that. And it may be well-meaning people who are really trying to help, but all of these responses will make the person really hard to continue seeking help. So I feel that's a big group of people. They are a little bit aware that, oh, something's not great. And they try to seek help, but then met with a lot of bad things. And then there's also, I would say, another group, maybe people who are lucky enough to have more strength and more resources. They are aware, and then they are seeking help, and they're actually having the courage to face the actual very negative consequences, like everybody talked a lot about here. Like you may actually be isolated. You may actually lose some friends. You may actually not be welcome in certain places you want to go to. And people who are kind of like warriors, really fighting these things, but they want to stay true to themselves. So I feel it's a good place to pursue to be. But at the same time, as a therapist, I also want to say each of us is in each stage for very good reasons, for very valid reasons. So even if a person's in the not aware stage, I think there's also very good reasons for that. And I think that's something actually I'll talk more about later. So I will right now give to Christina.
Thanks, Jiwon. So this is Christina. So I noticed that like I broke it down into this self-advocacy into like different parts because I try to think of the personal experiences that I've had. And so when we were talking earlier about the intersections of like the social determinants of health, which I mentioned earlier, so like criminal justice, healthcare, education, employment, these systems that some are very rooted in like biases. So my first experience as a self-advocacy, I can remember when I first got diagnosed, it was in a healthcare system. And I was facing some challenges working in accounting as a woman, where it's predominantly male dominated. And so I had to get hospitalized because I was just overwhelmed and I was being discriminated in the workplace. And I didn't understand that. So when I went into the therapy to the hospital, there was a white male medical director, and I'm trying to, but he brought in a whole team of like school students, and I'm saying, sharing and crying and oh, this happened to me at work and this happened to me at work. People don't listen, blah blah blah. And instead of like really listening and validating me, he misdiagnosed me with schizophrenia. Like what I wasn't saying was valid, but I knew what I was saying was true. And so he gave me this medication that kind of like paralyzed me because I couldn't move out the bed. And I remember that um I was traumatized in the hospital, honestly speaking. And so eventually, like luckily I didn't want to take the medication. So one of the people in the hospital, like one of the people that look on you when you're in the hospital, I don't know what you call them, patient care, whatever. He told me, if you don't take that medication, you won't be able to leave. So I took the medication, but I knew it wasn't the right medication. I knew it was the wrong diagnosis. So when I came out, I was able to find a doctor, fortunately, a Black male doctor, to talk to me about like what my experiences of living in America as a Black woman. And I was like, okay, I get it. But I still, he diagnosed me the right diagnosis, and I still take medication today because I know it fits for me. My second challenge was basically the criminal justice system, where I was at a friend from college's house, my college, and she was having emotional episodes, but she was diagnosed as yet, and she didn't want to get diagnosed. So her thing was marijuana to calm everything 24/7. And so, but I did notice that she had these very intense anger management sessions where she used to like beat up her husband. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not good. And I was like, one day I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat up me. And so happens that one day she got triggered and she started beating me up for no reason. So I called 911, hysterical crying, and the mistake I made, I said, I live with bipolar disorder and I need your help, right? Because I'm thinking that, oh, children and senior citizens, they can get help. So I have a disability. They're going to treat me like they're going to protect me. So when they came in as if I was the emotionally disturbed person, the EDP call, and they sided with her. They took their complaint down. I was like, well, what about me? I'm the one assaulted. Oh, well, we don't got your complaint. We can't take your complaint. And I'm like, but why? But why? You know, I'm the one assaulted. So that's when I realized that people with mental health were criminalized. So facing from the healthcare, but being misdiagnosed, and then being criminalized in a criminal justice system, I realized that self-advocacy doesn't always work, even though I still advocate because it's very important. But you know, like you mentioned, you and some people are the warriors. I try to be the warrior, but at the same time, I don't want to be the strong Black woman. It's very stressful. It's not a job I signed up for. I just want to be a woman, period. I just want to be a human being, period. Don't label me. I want to be treated with respect and dignity everywhere I go, period.
Mhm.
So the fourth question, how does peer support and lived experience help create truly safe spaces, especially for those marginalized or harmed by the traditional systems?
Great question. And I recently became a peers specialist. I had to take all these modules and stuff like that. And I have to say that, a peer talking to another peer, it's like, it's a language that we have that's understood. So it's very difficult to explain how I'm feeling to someone who's never felt that way, right? But someone who feels that way, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. And you don't have to do a lot of explaining. And my thing is, and I run a support group. One of the things that is really, really good is that, in sharing our experiences, we get it. And so we create a safe space that we could talk about things that we may not, if we're in a group that, never experienced these things, would be like, well, I don't get it. So creating that safe space peer to peer is really, really a good thing because there's support in numbers, where you feel like you're not alone, all those things are really important in bolstering your self-esteem, your I'm not alone. Oh, you felt that way too? Oh, I tried to explain to the other guy, he couldn't understand it. So those things in terms of advocacy, in terms of feeling not alone and being unified, all those things are important in someone who is dealing with a mental health challenge. So I think that's key.
Yeah, I when I see this question, I keep thinking I can't remember how many of my teenager clients who told me they are not killing themselves because of a certain idol. So the idol industry, celebrities, influencers, especially young people who follow a lot nowadays, a lot of them, I know there are many problems there, yes, but one really positive thing in my work that I see is that they really are oftentimes making teenagers feel they're inspired, they can feel good about themselves. I also have teenage clients told me that because they saw a certain celebrity talk about you don't have to be too skinny, you can have positive body image, and she felt very good about herself too. So I feel that's a very powerful resource to make especially younger people to feel that they can be who they are, and then still feel that they can be themselves. And another thing I want to say is just psychoeducation. Again, because I'm talking about Chinese community, I just feel the lack of awareness is really there. And if there's can be more psychoeducation, especially on not just for the people who are suffering, also for the family members, the friends. Like, how can you support someone who's depressed? How can you support someone who's anxious? So well-meaning people don't have to say the first thing comes to your mind, and oftentimes those are harmful things, and they're the well-meaning people actually don't want to say those things. So So I feel psychoeducation for everyone is something I'm thinking about.
Thank you. I fully hear exactly what is being said because it does resonate in the Spanish community or in any community. And if I want to even take it to the gender, male gender, creating a safe place where they're not going to be ridiculed, where they're not going to be spoken against, where they can just speak their truth and have people not interrupt, just listen, not try to correct, not try to impose their own opinions on them, just allowing that space. And then even following it up with a question. And how does that make you feel? And what are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
And and just allowing them and then asking them, so that's the surface feeling. Let's go a little deeper. What's actually going on underneath that's bringing this up here? So creating that place so to help break that stigma. And the stigma is I have nowhere to go. I volunteered there's an organization called All Kings, and they work with men. They have a woman's component, but they work with men and they pay, and this is in New York City, they will take the men every so often, men that want to go, they have a space, they go camping. While camping, they share that time for those men to open up and share when nobody's around but trees, and we have to tell them that there are no bears out there and stuff like that and no lions, but they've never been out there. They've never been out of the city to go somewhere so secluded and have the supports that you need so you can share what you want to share. And nobody is there to try to correct your behavior. We're there to support you and allow you to bring some things out that you normally would feel unsafe to bring out anywhere else. With veterans, coming back and everybody expect you to be okay after everything you may have seen, after everything you may have experienced. And that's even hard. And a lot of the individuals that I've worked with the intimate partner violence are ex-veterans. They come back on high alert, constantly hyper vigilant, and now they're expected on a switch to switch everything off and be okay. And when you're standing in key food, somebody cuts you off. What do you want to do? Pick up the cart and hit them over the head with it, and you got to quickly figure out a way to control. And they want to medicate you. No, they should have worked with this person prior to letting him or her go home,
Yeah.
so that they can readjust. The adjustment is not easy, depending on what you witnessed and saw. And even with the adjustment, sometimes you're going to need additional help. Unfortunately, the VA hospital is losing funding for all this, and it is challenging for a lot of these individuals. Christina?
Wow, Miguel, that was really powerful. I didn't really think about the vets, which is really important because often I mean, for you to serve this country and to come back and not have the services is really unfortunate. It's a disservice to them. So when I think about this peer support and lived experience question, I, you know, I advocate for public health responses to mental health crisis, right? And I believe that peers who with lived experience in like mental health, substance use, people who are unhoused or justice involved should be part of the first responders when engaging people when they're having an emotional crisis, and along with the EMT worker. With peers, as we both all agree that we listen with no judgment. We work on meeting people where they're at. We don't view people at what's wrong with you, but like really what happened? Tell me what's happened to you so I can help you through this. This is the kind of support that helps people feel safe, respected, and when talking with peers. I think it's important, like when we need to focus more on appropriate responses to mental health care, because police are trained to do the crime. When you think about 911, 911 has four responses. One is like if you get sick, you get a medical. If you got a fire, you have a fire department. If you get police, is used for crime, and police also respond to mental health. So they got two responses, but police are trained in crime. We need to move away to create a safe space like calling 988 or some kind of mental health response number because people need to feel safe when they get responded to. When we have peers in the space advocating, it's like we're more person-centered, we're culture responsive, with trauma-informed approaches to mental health care, and we treat people with dignity, compassion, and care, that's what we do. So in 2020, I created the Person-Centered Intervention Training Program in Fort Greene Park, where I hired peers to respond to people who were well, becoming unwell, who were in crisis. This is a way to divert people from the criminal legal system to treatment and care and meet people where they're at, because people are in need. If people are having crisis, you will, again, we need to find out what's happening, not what's wrong with them. Is it that because did they lose a loved one during COVID? Did they lose their job? Find those unmet needs, meet people where they're at, and if you help them with those needs, a lot of times it can recover quickly. So the last question is, how can we shift cultural norms to encourage most honest, stigma-free conversations around mental health and disability? John, you go first.
First thing I think about is having forums like this, talking about this, sharing. People just have not having the fear of being ridiculed or having that stigma of, oh my God, someone is going to put me down. The more we talk, the more we share. I tell you, when I give my talks, the first response I always get is, wow, you're so successful. Like someone with mental health challenges are not supposed to be successful, right? The second response I might get, especially since I'm in the community that people might know me in a joking way, is that, yeah, John, we always knew you were crazy, right? But the third response I get 100% of the time is me too, my uncle, my mother, my friend, so it's something that is really prevalent in our society. And the more we share and the more we talk, this program I'm doing, Sharing Hope, going into communities and talking about things that they never talk about. And it's such a relief, and they realize that, oh, you too. And I love it in the community conversations because I don't have to even say anything. They start, oh yeah, my daughter, and it's about a community healing and the community kind of healing each other. And I love the fact because they started sharing. So we need to do more of this.
I completely agree. And you already speak about my first point. So I'm not gonna repeat that. So my first point was just to be seen, basically. Like all our tears, the depression, and anxiety, different things people go through, just to be seen. Same point. And then another thing I want to say is related to what Christina shared before, which is there are days that we want to be warriors, but there are days that we just want to lie in bed or watch a movie or something, right? Like it's never a responsible or obligation for anyone to always have to be the fighter. So we all have the right to fight, and we all have the right to rest as well. So I just really want to state that. And I think that also relates to my third point, which is self-compassion. And it especially when we're doing this work for people who are trying to promote mental health or trying to heal themselves. I think if there's only one question a person can ask themselves, I feel a good question is, what do I feel today? How am I feeling today? Maybe I feel happy today. I feel excited today. I'm gonna do some warrior work. Maybe I feel depressed. I feel both fearful and anxious. Then let me take a bath, right? So I feel the self-compassion to really pay attention to oneself and to be attuned with one's own needs of the certain moment of each day. I feel that's a founding stone of how we can shift cultural norms to encourage more honest and stigma-free conversations. So I hope more freedom to everyone.
I always go towards the education, and I know we've been speaking quite a bit about the individual or individuals that may be going through some sort of mental health crisis or need some sort of assistance. But I also think that shifting the cultural norm requires educating the culture, the mother, the father, all the other individuals that are going to be around the person who's seeking support, so that they know what does it look like when what does it look like when I just need to sit next to this person, and what does it look like when I need to call somebody and have intervention arrive, mobile crisis, whomever. So what is that intervention? What does it look like? What does what does schizophrenia look like opposed to bipolar? Why? And because people use bipolar so loosely. Oh yeah, you bipolar. Yeah, you bipolar. Yeah, and understanding that education, which is why I love the mental health first aid, is not to teach them how to diagnose, is to teach them how to spot some warning signs, some little red flags that make them go, and then approaching, not judging, not coming in with any of your own bias, just allowing yourself to be the recipient of whatever this person may want to share. And they may say a lot without even saying a single word. So it's teaching the community that it's okay to see something and then knowing when to step in and say, hey, you know, one of the toughest questions when I facilitated mental health first aid is when you have to ask somebody, are you thinking of suicide?
Mm.
It's a tough question. And where it was even tougher was when some of those learning the skills, because of their faith and their religion, they wouldn't want to ask that question. What do you mean they want to kill themselves? They're going to go to hell. I said, but that's not what that person needs to hear. You want to be there and ask that question. And what if they say yes? Well, I'm glad you asked that. And then these are the steps that you can follow. And once again, it's being educated in what to do, what not to do, what to see. It doesn't mean that you go out there and try to diagnose, you're going to see something in everybody, because you might. So, but you're not there to diagnose. You're just to be educated, to see something that is all out of the normal. And then how do you assist this person in finding the supports that they need? All of them don't need to go to a clinician. They might be able to go to their religious leader. It looks different for everybody, and being okay with that.
Thanks, Miguel. So when I think about the shifting of cultural norms and having the conversation which we all brought up, I think about language, because language is powerful. Think about the terms, the derogatory terms that people may call all of us on the phone. Black male, Chinese woman, Puerto Rican male, the language that we use to describe each other in a derogatory fashion. So we know, like in our community, they call us crazy and the whole dangerous, well, most of the peer community. I'm not sure if people identify as peers in this call. And it's just like people are not humanizing us. And so we need to learn how to use more respectful terms to be more respectful and humanizing. I know, Miguel, you work with people with development disabilities. Is that the correct terminology? So I remember back in the days we used mental retardation.
Mm.
Well, that was heavy. But because of Rose's law, they changed mental retardation to people living with intellectual disabilities, which is more humanizing language.
Absolutely.
And this is what I feel about like the terminology when we talk in the criminal justice system, EDP, emotionally disturbed person. That's very not person-centered. It's not person-first language. It's not people living with. It's that we're EDP, which is dangerous and crazy and deranged. And if you read the patrol manual, you would see that. So I went to Assembly Person and I asked for language change. So right now it's been introduced from changing the language of emotionally disturbed person to people experiencing an emotional crisis. So we have people first experience an emotional crisis, which is person first, trauma informed, person centered, culture responsive language that makes it's more humanizing language. So to me, language starts there. It's about changing it to be more positive. But not only do people use the EDP in the criminal justice system, they use it in the clinical, they use it in schools, they use it in hospitals. So when you get the 911 call, it goes EDP to every single system. Now, if we change the language as a person experiencing a crisis or peace, they'd be like a person, we have a peace call, please go to, with the peer response, right? Help this individual see what services they need. And if you have to transport them, you take them to a hospital, to a respite center, to a clubhouse because they need the support. Just avoid going to the criminal justice system, right? So this is more of a public health response, but it starts with language first. And this is important to me because we start at the home, like we mentioned earlier. We start at the different systems, then we get all normalized mental health, and no one would be afraid, and the stigma would just die down. Any other remarks? Because that's all I have.
I just want to say thank you for this opportunity because I love the fact that different ethnicities and cultures were talking about the same thing, right? Different experiences. You hit the nail on the head about language, right? It's important that we change our language about. I mean, I even had a talk with the head of the National Alliance of Mental Illness, right? The big boss. And I said, we need to change that name. Could be National Alliance of Degrees of Wellness, right?
Yes.
Because illness itself is like, oh, ill is ill, right?
No, it's not even recovery. When you say
Right. Something in the more positive because our language shape, and I think Miguel mentioned it as well. Our language shapes our lives, and it's important. So I'm glad you guys spoke on that. We need to change, be more positive about things, more uplifting, and things will change. So I thank you guys for this opportunity. It's cool.
I really enjoyed this talk. I mean, any of you, Christina knows if you need my support with something, show up or whatever I'm here.
Cool.
We just gotta arrange my schedule, but it's what we're here for because on the other end, those of us that are assisting others, we need to be able to unpack as well.
Yes.
You can't just keep taking all this in and walking around with all this baggage and think that it's not going to affect you one way or another. So we need the support of our peers, those of us that are in the trenches, military, or those of us that are doing what we have to do to just even go out, even if it's to sit in the park, a Broadway play. Self-caring extremely hard together is important because it's the only way we're going to remain effective to those that are depending on us. And if any of you need support,
Amen.
Once again, don't be shy because you don't know if something that you need, a resource or something, one of us can step in and who knows.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Namaste. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Disability Unite Festival panel on folks who are blind or low vision. My name is Chancey Fleet. I'm the Assistive Technology Coordinator at the Andrew Haskell Braille and Talking Book Library, a proud branch of the New York Public Library, where I run a free tech coaching service and the Dimensions Lab for the creation of accessible graphics in 3D models. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to 4 of my colleagues today. And we're doing the panel together. So first up, we have Bobby Pompey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bobby Pompey. I teach independent living skills at the San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind, and I'm also an adjunct faculty member in the San Francisco State Department for Teachers of the Visually Impaired and Orientation and Mobility Specialist. And next, we'll hear from Sherry.
Everybody, my name is Sherry Wells Jensen. I am a professor of linguistics at Bowling Green State University in beautiful and swampy Bowling Green, Ohio. And my research interests are in astrobiology and disability studies, and I run our linguistics program at BGSU. And let me think, Abhita Sugupta, I think you're next.
So hi everyone, this is Sugandha Gupta here. I'm originally from India and currently I'm the Assistant Professor of Fashion Design and Social Justice at Parsons School of Design. I also am a textile and fiber artist and maker and of course a disability advocate. I teach courses in sensory design and tactile graphics and disability studies. And I'm going to pass it on to Min.
This is Min Ha. I am the Assistive Technology Manager at Perkins School for the Blind. Very proudly the first school for the blind in the country. And I'm also an accessibility and accessible technology advocate. I'm really excited to be here to share with you all of the experiences from this panel for Disability Pride Month. And I'm kicking off our conversation on a really special and really close topic to my heart: community and culture in the blind and low vision community. Um, so for me, I became blind when I was 7. I grew up in Vietnam, and I feel like in my culture, family, and community are super important. Everybody comes together to help. And when my family went through really awful attack and I became blind, I'm also a burn survivor, the community really came together and lifted us up and really helped us. And I've really bring this mindset to my identity as a blind and disabled woman, and also very, interconnected to that as my identity as an Asian blind disabled woman. And when I came to the US, I had a lot of blind and low vision mentors who really brought me under their wing and really helped me to form my identity as a blind person, as a proud blind person. Um, and I feel like in all of my work, professionally and personally, I really bring this spirit of community to everything that I do, because it is so important to have a community, to have a group of people that you can rely on for anything disability related. And I think it's really crucial for us, young blind children, but also adults losing their vision, to know that they have a community, that they have a space where they belong and where they are celebrated. I'm going to pass it on to Sagunda.
Thanks, Min. That was really wonderful, and I loved hearing about your experiences. So, I would say for me, blindness and low vision is a part of my life and has always been. I'm a person with albinism, so growing up in India, I always stood out of the crowd because I don't look like anybody in my community. I'm a white appearing woman with platinum blonde hair, and I have very pale skin and violet eyes. And so it was always kind of like I was always kind of living on the periphery. And of course, because I'm legally blind, I never had access to accommodations growing up in school. And so that kind of really was a big part of my life, just to try to figure out how to navigate creating access to education, creating access to art, because art was something that I was really always passionate about. And I think now that I'm a professor and I'm teaching courses in disability studies and I've developed my own body of work, I've learned a lot about the gain that comes through blindness and disability, especially like quoting Georgina Klieg here. And I think that there's so much beauty and opportunity for innovation and continuity that just comes through blindness and low vision. I also want to point out that being surrounded by more blind people of different types of spectrum of blindness is just so inviting in terms of what those different perspectives teach me and help me learn about just how different, in different ways, we all perceive and gain knowledge and gain access to knowledge and also contribute our own perspectives. So I'll stop there and I'll pass it on to Bobby.
Thank you. When I think about this question and I think about blindness and community and identity, the language nerd in me really hones in on the use of the word blindness. Um, and I think about my journey as growing up as someone who was low vision and now is totally blind. And I can't help but think about the power of connecting to the word blind specifically and how that unlocked a lot of community just through that particular identity. And so for most of my life, I didn't know that there were other people out there like me. And I was kind of this only lonely, as you might hear in certain circles. And that was pretty isolating for me. And I didn't really know what to do with that. And so I was trying to kind of fit a square peg into a round hole, or if it's vice versa, forgive me. But whatever that expression is. But once I realized there were other people like me, and that it was okay to call myself blind despite however much I could see, and I found other community out there, I got so much power in my confidence, in my skills that I learned from those folks, in the experiences that they shared and that I was able to share. And then ultimately in what I am able to give back to my community. And I think those experiences have really shaped who I am as a woman and who I am as a really strong member of the blindness community. And so when I think about that question, that whole experience is what is top of mind. So what do you think of, Sherry?
This question, I love this question because it's always what I say to people whenever somebody asks me, "What's the most important thing? What do you need?" My first thing is always, "Well, where's your community? Where are your people? That's your strength. Find it. Start there." But growing up as a blind kid in a small town, I didn't have any blind teachers. I didn't know any real kick-ass blind people, and so I had really good skills. I learned to use a cane. I learned to use Braille, but I sort of took those as kind of my hack into the sighted world so that I didn't have to be different. And so all of my fight as a kid growing up was don't nothing, nothing, nothing. Don't do blindness stuff at me. Yes, I read Braille. I don't know. It's just a thing. Don't pay too much attention to it. And so I used the skills that I had to do as much blending in. And so if you would say, had said blind community to me as a kid growing up, I would have been like, nah, nah, let's don't do that because that's going to be a limit and that's going to be a bad thing. Having, drunk the cultural Kool-Aid about disability. Right. And then, then when I grew up and maybe got some more sense about me, I suddenly realized that I had this desperate, almost hunger for the company of people who were moving through life in the same way that I'm moving through life, and not just how do you do the specific thing? What's your genius hack for this street corner? But just how do you be emotionally, spiritually, physically? How are you a human in these circumstances? And can we please be friends? I feel like whenever I meet a group of cool blind people, the first thing I want to be is like 6 years old on the playground and saying, "Can we please be friends? Because I need you guys. I need to learn. I just feel when I'm in a community of blind people, I just abruptly feel this weight that I didn't know I was carrying get sort of swept away for a few minutes. And I feel happy and excited and inquisitive. Um, and it's a power, it's an untapped resource that I didn't know about when I was a kid. Uh, I think, what about you, Chansey? I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
So I had kind of a similar trajectory to you in that I grew up blind with quote unquote good skills, whatever that means. Usually it means that sighted adults are really impressed, which is not always the best thing for a child. Um, and I grew up without a whole bunch of blind people around to learn from and sort of calibrate by. And then when I started working in activism and being a member of the NFB, I really identified strongly and quickly with this idea of blindness as strength and the power of alternative techniques and the primacy of and legitimacy of non-visual ways of doing things. Um, and that has really shaped my career and my identity and the things that I'm proud of. I really do look at the blind community as a source of wisdom and usually the quickest way to learn how to negotiate a situation or to do a complicated thing, whether it's art or turning wood or using some kind of a power tool, whatever it is. I want another blind person to show me most of the time because that's where the non-visual expertise is. Um, what I'll say has come to me later, and probably because of my work in the library, is I really used to define myself in opposition to people who had low vision or had vision loss or saw themselves as visually impaired or some other thing. I think among people who pride themselves on non-visual skills, like they feel very hard won and they feel very important because they are. And then among people who would identify as having vision loss, um, often that feels like a very emotional experience. There is some loss there. There's some grief there. Um, that group of people is processing maybe feelings of shame and transition that I never had to go through. And they're processing learning Braille and switching to reading with text to speech in a different way. Um, but what I've realized being at the library is that we have so much to teach each other, those two groups. I can tell you anything about Braille and technology and growing up as a cane user. And that group of people can tell me things that I've missed out on visuals. Like they deeply understand perspective. They understand some things about the sighted world, maybe that I don't. And if we can get out of our own heads enough and talk to each other as people and kind of plumb the depths of each other's experience and trust each other enough to do that, I think the hardest thing for me to learn has actually been how to trust people that identify in that way that's very different from the way I do, and realize that we are valuable contributors to one another's lives. On that note, yeah, I want to get back over to Suganda.
Thanks for saying that, Chansey, because when I just got integrated in the blind community, you were one of the main people that helped me get into the blind community in New York, because in India, I mean, the only person totally blind in my community was my music teacher. So it was different. When you're just with one person, it's very different than when you're part of a broader community. And to me, like, I was never, sorry for digressing and not moving on to the next prompt, but I really wanted to just acknowledge what you said because it's so important for me and it really touches a nerve somewhere in me. And uh, so, like, I always kind of felt like I'm part of nowhere because I don't really identify with the sighted community, because I don't do things like sighted people do. And I don't quite fit in the blind or totally blind community because I'm not totally blind. I have some vision. And I felt that my role in this in between space is just to be a bridge, and because I can understand kind of like a little bit of both sides, because I dabble between both sides. So I really appreciate you saying that. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. And with that, I want to move to the next prompt, which is just kind of reflecting on how technology and tactile solutions empower daily life. And as a artist and as a maker, I feel like I've always been driven towards tactile and auditory modes of learning and making, because that's just more of my strength than my sight. So I think that's kind of just the most cliche way of kicking this conversation off. But as an artist, I feel like the knowledge of materials that comes through touch for me has always has always surprised sighted people around me. When I was working in the industry, a lot of people used to be stunned as to how I can recognize fabrics just by touching them. And I would be like, hey, I'm not going to give you that secret. It's just my little thing that I do. And so that kind of was always part of my life. And now I'm just a champion of, or and an advocate for non-visual design, because I think there's so much richness in the vocabulary of touch and in the vocabulary of different materials. I've brought my class several times to the library, and whenever Chansey brings out the three-dimensional objects that are made with 3D printing, my first instinct is to knock those objects with my nails and try to hear the sound they create and guess the material it is. And it's usually plastic, and we usually have a big laugh about it in my class sessions. So I would say that it even adds a little bit of humor while also adding a rich vocabulary of just understanding materials and the inherent tangible knowledge that comes through those materials. So right now, at the top of my head, that's what I can think of. So how about I pass it on to Min this time?
I love this question. Um, Not just because I work in assistive technology now, but I'm just thinking of how much tech and tactile things have impacted my life and how much I rely on them every single day. Um, More than most people would even think about. Just to give an example, I just checked into my hotel and the toiletries that they provide are all different shapes. And so once I've identified which bottle is the shampoo or which bottle is the conditioner, I'll be able to identify it again next time. Just little hacks like this that Blind people have had to kind of devised ourselves in order to make the lack of information more accessible to us. And then in thinking about this question, I'm a 90s baby, so I can't even remember my life without any kind of tech. When I lost my vision in Vietnam, the most high tech equipment that we had at the boys' school that we went to was a Perkins brailler. If you're not familiar with Perkins brailler, I don't know, it's like 8 pounds. It's very heavy, it's very loud, and it's very recognizable to every blind child and adult that have gone through some kind of educational program. And so when I came to the US, I had a whole world open up to me in terms of like computers and refreshable braille displays. And now that I'm working in AT, that realm has really im- improved, in terms of tech and affordability and I think availability as well. Uh, so I'm a staunch advocate of braille and tactile literacy. I use it on a daily basis. I can't imagine doing my work or going through my personal life without it. And I just think back to what everybody has said about the Black community being innovative, like being a source of wisdom. And I think in all of our tech and tactile tools, they most of them have come from a community. Uh, and that's why a community is so important because we learn from each other, we innovate together, we teach each other all of these different tools and skills. I'm going to pass it on to Bobby.
Thank you, ma'am. This topic, similar to you, I am like, oh, there's so much here. There are so many different tactile and technology solutions that we get to benefit from. The first and foremost and very obvious one being Braille. I will admit that Braille is something I never thought I would use as much as I do. I learned Braille on a whim as my senior project. It's something when I was in high school, everyone had to pick a project that you then wrote a paper about and did a presentation about, and also did kind of like a more physical aspect. So, for example, someone else learned about painting cars, and their actual project is that they painted their car like this beautiful magenta color. But that's neither here nor there. And so I learned Braille as my senior project, and I did my research paper on the genetic condition that I have that is related to my eyes and all the other fun things going on in this body of mine. And I never really thought I'd use it. I was, as I mentioned, low vision at the time, and wrote it off in the way that Braille can be completely written off for low vision folks. And oh my word, I've always used Braille a ton. There are some pretty interesting statistics that say that very few people who are blind or low vision, I think it's around 10%, actually know Braille, but yet those who are employed use it at a really high number. And to kind of see how much I use it for labeling, I use it for just jotting down notes, I use it for more of the kind of spot reading things, but I am always shocked by that. Just never thought I'd see my life going in this direction with Braille. I think about things like what you shared, Min, with just the kind of spotting out tactile features in things, figuring out what products in my life are just based off of the what it feels like, the buttons are, how do I know what this piece of technology is, how it works just based off of getting my hands on it. It's definitely something I do in my teaching of independent living skills all the time. Always talking about what does it feel like if you're cooking something, can you see that it's done or tell that it's done based on the texture changing a lot. So I think tactile elements in technology can be super duper important for blind and low vision folks. What's your opinion on it, Chancey?
I think I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the moments where I experienced a type of technology for the first time. Not so much the technology itself, as that somebody made a decision to frame something in a certain way for me. So when I was growing up, my parents made sure that I had lots of Braille books and Braille instruction, but they also got like pretty deep with it. My father made me a cuckoo clock, um, and he's a pretty funny guy. So the cuckoo had dark glasses and a little white cane, but it also had bronze Braille numbers all around the face. And he made me a box that had my name in Braille. And my mom would do Easter egg hunts with me, and I'd have to follow this trail of clues through our little house and around outside. And we had a chicken coop, and sometimes there were clues in there. And they were all in Braille. And she'd sighted, but she learned enough Braille to not only support me with my education, but make Braille a really fun part of my life. I remember my father making sure that I had a laptop back in the 80s when I was in like kindergarten. I was the only person in elementary school with a laptop. And then I remember later on being like 7 or 8 years old, rolling up on Saturday to the library at Virginia Commonwealth University, and there were no, like, legitimate college students there because it was Saturday. They didn't wanna be at the library, but I did, and the librarians gave me the big old key and said, "Go on back there and let me use the Reading Edge," which was the fancy reading machine that cost tens of thousands of dollars at that time, and I would just spend Saturday afternoon there scanning stuff and reading what I wanted to read, and those experiences, as much as the technology myself, remind me that sometimes it's a friend or a family member, sometimes it's a total stranger that just decides to go that little bit out of their way to make sure that somebody has an experience with technology or Braille or a way of doing things. And it's not always easy for me in my career to assess my impact. It's impossible to know what days I've made a big difference for somebody else down the line and what days maybe I haven't. But one thing that I can do is remember that that little extra bit of effort, that little extra bit of fun, choosing the more expansive view of a situation and giving somebody a little bit of extra information or a little bit of extra motivation, if I can find it in myself to do it that day, I'm increasing the odds that I did something that will ripple out. And I don't think I always achieve that, but it's always something that I think about. Sherry, what do you think about?
I was laughing at your story about your dad because my mom was sort of similar. She learned to read and write Braille as a sighted person long before I did. And so she would write me letters when I'd go away, I go to camp, I'd get a postcard like everybody else. I was really always noticed that she took that extra moment. Um, and when I was not a satisfactorily cautious blind child at all. I used to just sort of run places figuring, I don't know, either would jump out of the way or I did it, I guess, I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm grateful for the pieces of my brain that are still intact. But my mom, when she did something, when she wanted to leave me a note, she would tape it to a piece of yarn and tape the yarn across the doorway so that when I came crashing in from the school bus, I would basically get clotheslined with whatever piece of information she wanted me to have. So just the Braille is everywhere. But I think like everybody else here, such a big advocate for tech, and I love tech, but I find myself sort of constantly deeply curious slash impatient because I wonder what we would be doing if we had the time and the equivalent time and energy with our tech that sighted people have with their tech. Like, what would be the next step in Braille? How small can you make Braille and still read it? How big can you make Braille? Like, what would happen to our literacy if we had books with large print, like larger Braille, jumbo Braille, and then small Braille, and sideways Braille? Like, what else can we do? And I'm always, I was Segunda's your talk about noticing the texture of fabrics. Well, everybody could do that, and what else could we do, right? If we just had the freedom to push forth, the freedom and the resources to push forward and find what are the natural limits of touch and acoustics. Like where could we be going if our community had the time and the resources to get together and just push those edges out like crazy? I'm wondering who has not answered this question. I think everybody has. Yep.
Yeah, I think we all did. I think we're on to Bobby.
So next we're going to talk about the misconceptions of blindness and ability. Another question that I think we could all wax poetically for quite a while about. I know I could, so I'll contain myself. And first, I'll just address that I think for a lot of folks, ability and blindness don't even go in the same sentence. And I think that proof is evident in a lot of like systems that exist that are not accessible to blind folks because they never expected us to show up. I think is that proof is evident in some of the mindsets of people that lots of us on this panel and other people kind of come across, where you kind of hear statements that's like, "Ooh, you didn't think I could do that," or "You didn't think that was possible." And it also can be proven by just things that some of us blind and low vision people may even think about ourselves. And all of those can be kind of wrapped neatly into this phrase called ableism, or just thinking that people with disabilities are a little less than. And so I guess to not wax on so long about this concept of misconceptions about blindness and ability, I'll just say it's possible. And I think all of my fellow panelists are proof that there totally can be ability connected to blindness. I think a lot about my students at Lighthouse. Most of my students are folks that have just gone blind, like some as recently as this year, and they're figuring it out, right? Like they're doing the things that they still want to do. Um, Despite, and I say that in quotes, their blindness or their low vision. And so I think the concepts can totally go together just fine. And I'll end there. And I'll pass it to Min.
This is, like Bobby said, this is a really big topic to unpack. And I think for me, the misconceptions of blindness really come down to, I think, fear for people. Because I think, I'm sure everybody on this panel has had a variation of, I wouldn't be able to be blind. I've had people say to me, I would rather die than be blind. Because people just equate blindness with just a total lack of ability and a total lack of being able to take care of oneself. Sherry's the linguistics professor, so I'll let her talk about the origins of the word blind. But even in our vocabulary, right? Like people say, replace the word blind for being unable to make intelligent decisions. And so I think it comes down for me to fear in people, but also just this misconception that blind people are unintelligent somehow, that we don't know what we're doing, or what we're able to do on a daily basis. Sherry, since I talked about your linguistics background, maybe I'll pass it on to you. So
Cool. This is such a big topic. So I'll give you the 30-second summary of the research paper. So linguists are interested in the meanings of words, of course, and the word blind in English means several different things, but none of them are brilliant, beautiful, or incredibly intelligent, right? None of those related meanings of the word blind are anything that you would want. they're not positive, right? But so one of the things I thought that I would do with a group of colleagues is we looked for the same kinds of meanings across languages. So we took a language sampling of languages from around the world, from all the different language families, widely spoken languages, languages with very few speakers. We just tried to do a nice spread out set, and we looked for the the shades of meaning of the word blind across languages. And we found this continuing trope of blind meaning ignorant or blind meaning unthinking or unfeeling across languages. So it's not just us. I mean, we're not going to just bust on English here for being that way. We also know from psycholinguistic research that the way that you use words affects the way that you think. It's not that thing that they talk about with, however many thousands of words for snow. They're supposed to be in quote Eskimo, which isn't even the name of language. Anyway, the answer to that question is about 4 from a linguistics perspective. The Inuit languages have about 4 words for different kinds of snow. But it's not that thing either. But the way that you speak and the words that you use do affect the way that the kinds of things you remember and the kinds of things that you group together. So the fact that you use the word blind to mean ignorant does in fact affect the way you think about blind people. We can stick you in the laboratory and we can measure that. Um, and so I think just to add on top of that, misconceptions about blindness, from my perspective, one of the things that I think about a lot is the emotional reality of being a disabled person in a non-disabled world, like walking through your life, feeling the psychological, spiritual impact of ableism on you every day. And I think that is not an aspect that people spend too much time thinking about. Um, so, uh, there's just everyone has their own sort of way of dealing with these things. Some people just suppress and pretend like it doesn't matter. Some people go into it a lot. Some people, some people are broken by the rage and the sadness of just being treated like either a doorstop or a paragon of ability. With very few things in between there, right? And it's a lot. And so I think that the reality that we have this whole range of life reactions to being a living being in a body that's different than other people's bodies. That's a big, powerful, strong thing. And some of it, like some of the friends here have said, some of it can result in you having cool insights and maybe more resilience. And some of it is just no fun. And I think those misconceptions that I think the most destructive thing about that is that for someone who has to go through the very difficult journey of going from a sighted person to a blind person, which is a hell of a ride, um, there isn't, I think they think that they're supposed to have it all worked out really soon, or that they're never going to have it worked out. And the fact that that's sort of a constant journey. Maybe you're not journeying toward accepting your blindness. I'm not sure that that's a thing that I worry about too much at my stage of blindness right now. But uh, just accepting the way that you're treated in the world and figure out what are your hacks, what are your energy sources, how do you get by in a day when you just really don't know when you go out into the world how you're going to be treated. Like, that was a kind of a wild random rant. I'm sorry. What about you, Chansey?
I loved it. I think the misconception that I want to talk about is the misconception that sighted people have about what's hard about blindness. When I'm going to the airport, and this is given that I've done some training and I've hung out with other blind people and I've learned a lot of skills. So I guess the first misconception, if you're newly blind or if you've been blind for a while and you're just thinking about things, if you don't think you could make it on your own across the street or through an airport or go pick up groceries and find a shopping assistant, it's probably not because you're bad at those things. It's probably because you haven't logged the experience hours. Like if you're sighted and you grow up around sighted people, you go on hundreds of shopping trips, you cross streets with your school class tons of times and everyone's doing it the same way. You go to the airport, you see how your family do it, and you're going to be doing it pretty much that same way. If you are blind, hopefully you're surrounded by educators and friends and colleagues who can help you with that stuff and you go do some skill building at some point. If you're newly blind, the number of hours that you really need to get good, and I know that good is a loaded word, so I'll just say good to your satisfaction, aren't really offered to you on a silver plate. You really have to self-advocate a lot more than you should have to get training out of most systems, and they won't tell you how much training it takes to get really comfortable. And so I often hear that my library patrons are being told, "Oh, you're done with mobility, congratulations." And they're freaking terrified. And they say, "I just don't think I'm a good traveler." So misconception number 1 is that it's you bad at blindness. No, the systems are pretty bad at blindness sometimes, and that's yet another reason we've got to surround ourselves with community who can help us calibrate what is possible and where to get services when it's not obvious, when your needs maybe aren't being met. And then the other misconception I think that sighted people have is about like what we worry about given we have those skills. Um, I'm not really worrying about whether I'll find my gate or my seat at the airport or when my little shrink wrapped cheese and crackers comes that I won't know how to open it. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm worried that the guy in security is going to ask my traveling companion, my professional colleague, "Oh, is she traveling with you?" and speak over my head. I'm worried that I might not be able to find the taxi stand as quickly because there's no accessible signage, even though there's a million techniques for making signage more accessible. Basically, I'm burning up my energy thinking about how to hack around people's behavior and the built environment. And it's not really the blindness itself that's the problem. It rarely comes up when I'm in an environment that I constructed for myself, whether that's at work or at home. But it sure does come up in interaction with other people. And the good news, the positive uh, takeaway for sighted people from that is that by just communicating clearly and kindly and offering options and listening to what people say, you can really change the way that someone's going to experience their day and their interaction with you. And you don't have to know a whole lot about blindness to do that. You just have to kind of be a cool human being and ask people what they need and take their answer. Suganda, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I have a couple, 3 points mostly that I want to talk about. Uh, well, as a person who has some vision, one of the misconceptions that people have is that your vision can be cured with all the technology that's there, and that your quality of life, and I think this is common for both totally blind people and people like me who are in between, is that our quality of life is heavily dependent on how much sight we have. And that quality of life is not just the personal quality of life. I think it's also, I'm referring to like the quality of work we do, or the quality of, I mean, I know that this kind of borrows on the broader ableism conversation, but I think it really does apply to a very wide spectrum of the blind community. So it's the biggest misconception that I go through often is people telling me different tantras and mantras and techniques and ointments and treatments that can cure my vision. Um, and I think that a lot of people assume that the work that I do or have been able to do or produce is largely because I have some vision. And I definitely don't borrow into that, because I think that all the work that we do and all the quality of life that we have is not dependent particularly based on how much sight we have or don't have. Rather, many other factors that come together to help us produce that work. So it's not one or the other things. It's just a compilation of many different things. The second big misconception that I think I want to point out towards is just kind of how narrowly people think about the spectrum of blindness. And as a cane user who sees much less outside, so my vision varies a lot based on the light. When there's bright sunny light, I can see much less than if I'm indoors in a much more controlled environment where maybe the light source is only pointing towards my work or my reading material or whatever. So that's another big one that I live on a day-to-day basis, where outside I'm really like any other blind person, using my cane, getting all the cues from the environment in terms of the sound and tactile cues. But indoors, I can see a lot more, and I have a lot more access to what's around me. And so a lot of times there's a lot of hostility when people are not literate in the spectrum of blindness as to uh, the diverse ways that people see the world and experience the world. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I covered all 3 points. They were kind of overlapping. So I think we can move on to the next subject.
I'd like to talk a little bit about inclusive design, and we were going to talk about Braille now, but I think we've sort of explored Braille a little bit. I will say, for anybody that's watching that's heard that maybe Braille is on the decline or that it's not as important because it's bulky and expensive, you have no idea how much Braille has innovated in a short time period. Braille just turned 200 years old. Print is like, I don't know, 5,000 years old. And in that 200 years, we've gotten to a point where we have digital Braille displays that can show one line at a time. You can carry around hundreds of books. I've got one right here. If you're in the US and you're eligible, you can get a free one through the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. Thank you guys for permitting the infomercial. So Braille is super versatile, and I use it for taking notes, and I use it for labeling things. I'm into aeroponics, so I label all my little seed packets. I use it for reading notes. I use it for reading Braille subtitles so that I can quote unquote practice my Spanish by watching telenovelas on Netflix. Braille gives you this precision and immediacy and the ability to read in your own voice. And I won't say that it's the only non-visual literacy method that exists, because obviously it's not. But Braille is so versatile and so great in so many situations. More broadly, I think the takeaway I'd like to leave people with in terms of inclusive design is that all people want and deserve to move through spaces and experiences and environments under our own power, even if people are happy to help. By and large, we want at least the option to move freely throughout the world. And so things that help me do that, I perceive very favorably. I used to have mixed feelings when I was growing up about audible pedestrian signals, because if you had the right skills, couldn't you just cross the street by listening to the traffic? And I now think everybody deserves to feel confident crossing the street, whether they're good at localizing sound or not. So, like, please put up that APS. It's great for everyone. It's an extra modality, and who doesn't want more information? Put the APS there. Put the Braille signage there. Put the large print signage there. And when I think about more low-tech inclusive design, thinking about communities of solidarity and people that want to help and aren't sure what to do and might not have a big budget, might not even be, you know, big D decision makers, asking people what their accommodation needs are and planning to be flexible and listening to what people say they need and being creative when needs arise last minute is always very welcome. Often I'm struck by being at a museum and somebody that just happens to be in the group with me describes something for me in a very evocative way, or someone comes across the street to me to matter-of-factly say, "Hey, there's construction and everybody's diverted off the sidewalk in a couple seconds. Just heads up." Um, Information is a powerful thing, and offering your solidarity in a moment is a powerful thing, and it's something that anybody can do without prior experience. So, um, we don't all design environments, but we all design interactions. And those of us that do design environments, I think we can and should look for designs and design modalities that support people feeling oriented and confident as much as we possibly can. Let me pass it to Min.
This is a really big topic for me as well. But I want to take it maybe more personal experience for me and kind of dovetailing off of what Chancey was saying about building or like designing interactions that are inclusive. Um, and this goes into environments too. Like I have additional disabilities besides for blindness. Like I have a little bit of a hearing impairment. And so for me, I do have the training, I do have the good skills to travel independently, and I do. Um, but sometimes crossing streets are really difficult for me because I can't localize sounds. And so having audible pedestrian signals, having those tactile domes on the sidewalks to uh, line me up for a good street crossing. Uh, and all of the other environment designs that help blind and low vision people travel more independently and confidently. I think all of those things we should all stand behind. And the same thing with audio descriptions for media and entertainment. Uh, I think a lot of focus is still very much on education and employment. And just thinking probably within the past 20 years or so, we really have uh, made it more of a priority for blind and low vision folks to be included in entertainment and pop culture. If we think about memes, like memes have been extremely inaccessible to us for a very long time until, or unless a friend describes it to us in really great detail. Um, but we deserve to be a part of the conversation. We deserve to be a part of the larger culture. And so that's what I think about when I think of inclusive design. It's like, how can you as an individual, how can you as a group, as a community, as an organization, what can you do in order to facilitate that access and think about everybody, not just a small group of people that may be able to enjoy something. And what about you, Sandra?
This is very close to my heart, and I have lots of things to say on this topic, but I'll try to stay more on the design and art side of it. So, when I think of design, and especially someone who practices multisensory design modalities in my own art practice, and I also teach a course called Sensory Design Studio. One of the things that I really encourage students and designers, and also keep learning from myself, is first of all, like just having much better representation and learning from an authentic experience, because there's so much knowledge that is embedded in embodied experiences uh, that gets lost when we try to translate that from someone else's point of view. So I really think that designers really need to focus on, and design in general needs to be really borrowing from the expertise that's embedded in many different embodied experiences and knowledges that come from that experiences that are usually hugely undermined and not even acknowledged at times. The other thing is, I think, of course, there's a huge power for design to be inclusive. And again, it starts from representation, but I also advocate a lot for versatility. So, just by the virtue of an object being offered in multisensory formats, it by default creates much more access for many different lived experiences. And again, we can keep on making it more versatile by bringing in more perspectives, bringing in underrepresented bodies and minds to the forefront, so that we can try to address things that maybe are out of our purview, or our inherent biases, because we all have some kind of biases. So I think just making design that's more versatile and also multisensory and multimodal creates a better bridge, but also makes it more interesting. And then also audio descriptions are something that I want to advocate for here as well, because of course they're part of access, and of course they create a bridge between visuals and non-visual modes of acquiring that knowledge of the visual. But I think it also is such a great way of engaging with art or design. So for example, when I'm at a museum, and when I was in grad school, a lot of the information that I was learning was through a dialogue and discussion. And when you're with blind people and low vision people, that discussion is just so natural and organic and kind of just default. And it just creates such a deep engagement with art. And really, whether or not you have sight, you really need to have that dialogue to understand what you're looking at and to process what meaning that brings to the forefront. So I have a lot to say about this, but I'm gonna stop there. And if we have time, we can always revisit this subject later. And I'll pass it on to Bobby.
I love your mentioning of the bringing the visuals and the non-visual connection with the multimodalities of audio description. I mentioned earlier that I teach a class at SF State, and it is for TVIs and O&Ms that'll be working with K through 12 students. And when we talk about audio description, one of the things we connect it to is language development and concept development for kids who are low vision and blind. It also could totally apply to adults too. But one of the reasons that I love audio description is to bring in potentially new words and new concepts. So we showed the beginning of, I believe it was the Mario movie to our students this semester, and it talked about the shiitake mushrooms that are in the Mario thing. And that could be a great way that if you have students, again, we're talking about kids in this case who maybe have never seen a mushroom, who just don't know that particular, is it a species, a variation of mushrooms? It could be a great time that through watching a movie, through now you have that language to then talk about how you have all of these different types of mushrooms. And so now you can introduce them. If we tie it back to the previous question about all the different tactile things, like now you can bring into the classroom different types of mushrooms that they can feel, they can see the sizes, they can see the shapes. You can talk about the different colors if you want. Now you can bring it into a different type of lesson, and now you can do a lesson on knife skills, and now you're chopping. So I think audio description is really great in that it, of course, makes something that is inaccessible accessible, like it's describing the visual elements of a movie that don't have words, but it often is said in really great language because it only has a little bit of time to make the most of that description. So you get some fascinating word choices that even as an adult, sometimes I'm like, what does that mean? Um, so I love the richness of the language and how you can really use it as an opportunity to get words that you may often find in books. I think a lot of time you get that level of description of scenes. So that's one of my favorite things about audio description is how you can make some fun language invention from it. How about you, Sherry?
Thank you, Bobby. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed all these answers, and they're all such really great answers. And it really, I love what Chansey said about we all design interactions. I'm thinking about, hey, heads up, there's construction is a super useful way of enriching information, right? And that's something I really want to know. Hey, where are you going? Or where are you trying to go? Or are you lost? Or not greetings, right? So that's if you're going to design an interaction that is designed to make somebody feel irritated with you. Are you lost or where are you trying to go is a super good way to design hostility or at least tiredness into your reaction. But I think for me, the end call on why all of this matters. So much good stuff said here about kids and about people who are new to blindness. And I think one of the essential things, though, is that we are entering a period of severe global warming, and we just got done with a pandemic. And what that means is Earth is out there with a big, giant recruiting sign out for more disabled people. Right? There's not going to be less disabled people in the world going forward. Sure, there'll be some innovations, some healthcare stuff will improve, things, and yeah, maybe some technology will do this or that or the other thing. But in general, what we've learned from the pandemic is that our general disregard for the environment and our carelessness with one another means that we're going to have more disabled people, not fewer, going forward. And so, something that might not feel important to the average non disabled person walking down the street could become essential material out of nowhere. We are the only disability that it's super duper easy to join. Um, whether people want to join us or not, lots of people are going to. And if we're all lucky enough to live a long time, our abilities will change and we'll become disabled anyway, right? So this stuff is not a niche thing to think about for those disabled people over there who deserve inclusion. This is the inclusion of things like audio description and braille education and braille signage and auditory beacons for crossing streets. All of that is in everybody's best interest. And you don't even know whose best interest it's going to be in because you don't know who's going to become disabled later on. So the outreach aspect, I think, is super important, which makes me have questions about what it is we want people to do. So what are the best practices? What should sighted people know? And I personally, when I could fill many volumes with what I wish sighted people would know. Um, but I think it comes down to a couple things. I mean, obviously, you don't put your hands on another human's body without permission. I think we could all, raise hands and agree about that. Nobody who touches me in public without my permission, whether they think they're just moving me or whatever they think they're doing, is my friend. That is, just no, just no. Keep your hands to yourself. And I think a lot about the courteously asked question as a good thing, but I also think about the fact that Google is everybody's friend. So if you if you notice a cook, this is just the crazy example that I came up with 2 seconds before turning on my computer today to talk to you guys. So if I have a question about cooking, say I just really, 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 really gotta know how many tablespoons are in a cup. That's knowledge I don't have, and I really gotta know it. And I see a person who looks like a cook walking down the street, and maybe they look like the best cook, that I've ever seen, and maybe it's even a famous cook. They're just really good at cooking. I can tell that maybe by their hat or whatever. Like, I'm not gonna go up to that person and go, "Hey, how many tablespoons are in a cup?" I would be embarrassed to ask that question. I would quietly Google it. But if ah, yeah, I might have other things that I want to say to that person. So I think there are lots of really good resources out there on how to run a conference. Uh, you can Google. There's always, 10 things I wish sighted people knew about blind people, and if we could all argue about what should be on that list, right? But Google is your friend, I would say, first off, and think about whether you want somebody asking that question about you, because we've all also had a lot of super intrusive, really weird questions that we all talk about. Non-disabled people are out of the room like, "Do you know what that guy asked me? Oh my God." That we have that list that sort of just increases the weariness quotient. So I'm super interested in what the rest of you might have to say about best practices. And maybe Bobby, do you want to take a stab at that?
So I am going to say what a lot of people usually don't say. So I'll first just acknowledge that we're all different. So what I say might not be what other people would say. And so that's tip number one. We're different. So there kind of isn't this one size fits all answer. We probably could all come up with a list of general things we might agree with, but there isn't a one or a group of answers. But the first thing I will say is you don't have to do anything. If you're a sighted person and you see a blind or low vision person, we are just people, probably just living. And the idea that there is something that is in need of doing is problematic in and of itself. You don't have to do a thing. You don't have to ask us if we need help. More than likely, 9.999 times out of 10, we have just been doing whatever we have been doing all day. We're just going to work, going to get a coffee, on the train, taking the dog out, having a phone call, at the doctor's, whatever you are doing, we're just living. As Chancey said earlier, we're just logging those experience hours where we already have those hours and we're doing what we need to do. And the fact that you think something needs to be done about whatever we're doing is probably cause for you to sit down and think about what you think about blind people. So the answer is nothing. However, if you still want to do something, realize that if we need something, which happens, I'm not going to deny that because the world isn't made accessible to us. Point number 2. So if we need something, it's probably not our fault. Surprise. It's probably not blindness's fault. It's probably back to all those inaccessible things that we've talked about earlier. Probably because there should be a sign here or there should be something else. Um, we also have this locus of control that we can ask you. So now I'm back to my previous point of you probably also still don't have to do anything. But if you still decide that there's something you want to say or something to do, I am a huge advocate of consent. And so it's worthwhile to dive in with that head first. And so if you have a question, if you do have this curiosity and it's made it to your mouth before your Google, like Sherry recommended, it's always wonderful to just ask, like, I do have a blindness question. Are you open to that? So those would be kind of my tips. And I would just say, I think someone mentioned it earlier, just realize that these are encounters we are having all day, every day, where a lot of times, not everybody, because there's an exception and yada, yada, yada. Um, these are kind of how people are coming at us every day, all day. So if you can try to acknowledge that you're probably not the first. And so that weighs on how we interact or can weigh on how someone might interact with you. So be gentle. And so just acknowledge like that part and come in with, do you want to have this conversation with me about your personal experience? And give us a chance to opt into that conversation is appreciated by most. What do you think, Suganda?
I think Sherry and you have really covered a lot of ground, and I would just like to say just one point and emphasize just one point, and that is just get to know us. Just get to know, just form organic relationships and form synergetic bonds that are testimony of time rather than just transactional and extractive and have an end goal. Because once you start forming organic relationships that don't really have an end goal, you'll learn a lot more, and not just about the person in question but also about yourself. And that's really what we need. We need to humanize and normalize all the different lived experiences that are on this earth. So yeah, and Chancy, I'll pass it on to you.
I'll just add on thematically to what you two have said. You know, number one, if you have a question for me that's about something other than blindness and you're a stranger chasing me down on the street, I'm so excited. I was out walking recently and some guy from across the street was like, ma'am, can I ask you a question? And I just keep walking, like straight in my face, like, I'm not ma'am, am I? And I know I am, ma'am. Because I'm expecting some kind of a blindness question. Maybe it's going to be something about my dog. And when he finally tracked me down, he was like, you've got the same headphones I have, Aftershocks. Do you know where to buy a charger? And I was just so excited that somebody was initiating a random interaction that didn't have to do with some blindness street question. So, yes, if you have a loved one who is blind or low vision and trying to figure out how to do something, I have an exception for you, but lead with that. Like, hey, can I ask you a question? I have a brother. I have a niece. I have whatever, because I have a deeper well for you if you're getting information to someone else who firsthand needs it. Just please lead with that. Um, I don't think any of us want people to be scared to ask questions, but some of us are in the field working in this area of inquiry all day, and even those of us that aren't, we've heard all the questions before, so help us triage them. It's nice.
So when it comes to best practices for sighted folks interacting with Black people, I have a lot of best practices, but I think it really just boils down to I think having humility and being able to know that you don't have the answers, that you're not the expert in the lived experience of Black people. And so ask a lot of questions. Um, Personally, I don't mind questions at all. I think it comes from a place of curiosity. Um, I mean, a lot of times people will ask really basic questions. And that's not okay. But if their questions come from a place of curiosity, of learning, of bettering oneself in order to be, uh, just a better human being and a better ally to our community, I'm all for it. Um, and going along with asking questions is listening. I've seen a lot of instances where people, ask questions, but they don't actually listen. I think that's the most important part of this equation is you're asking a question, be willing to listen to uh, the experts, the people that are actually living this life and know exactly what they need and uh, their access needs. Um, so asking questions, listening, and I just really want to quickly emphasize what I think Chancey and Bobby were saying with the incidental learning. A lot of blind kids don't get that. They don't get that visual access to information that so many sighted kids do. And so as an individual, if you can provide that information to a blind person, to a blind friend in a really respectful, accessible, inclusive way, please do that. I can't tell you how much it means to me when I go on social media and I see a friend including a really great image description to their photos without me even asking. You know, blind people and disabled people in general, I think they have to do a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of like emotional work, emotional labor in order to get the access that we want and need and deserve. So when it happens organically like that, it's so amazing. And just, even daily interactions on the street, when I get somebody who's really respectful of me and my bodily autonomy, that goes a long, long way.
Thank you all so much for joining me for this panel, and I'd like to thank the organizers of the Disability Unite Festival for putting this together and putting it in our hands. And thank you to everybody that watched and built solidarity with us. We'd love to hear from you, and have a happy Pride Month.
Hello and welcome. My name is George Gallego, and I'm proud to introduce you to the Access Project, a place where possibility meets purpose. I created the Access Project because I lived the gaps. As a paraplegic, I experienced firsthand the lack of accessible wellness spaces that truly honored the full humanity of people with disabilities. I knew we deserved more, not just ramps and gym equipment, but a community. A space that sees us, values us, and pushes us to thrive. So in 2014, we built something revolutionary right here in East Harlem, a multicultural, community-based health and wellness center, specifically designed for people with disabilities and seniors. But we're not just a gym. We're not just a service provider. We are a movement, rooted in equity, resilience, and transformation. Our members come here for adaptive fitness, personal training, peer support, and even social services. But what they leave with is so much more: confidence, connection, and a renewed sense of power. At Access, we believe that disability is not a limitation, it's a lens through which strength, creativity, and purpose shine even brighter. Whether it's boxing from a wheelchair, spinning on a crank cycle, or finding support with housing or even healthcare, our members are reclaiming their power every single day. This is more than a program. This is personal. This is community. This is the Access Project. If the world were truly built with universal design in mind, what do you think life would be like?
That's powerful. I think about the future a lot, and like going out and everything, I always have to think ahead of what I'm doing and everything to make sure everything's wheelchair accessible and all that. So if I could just come outside and not have to worry about that, that would be just a different type of freedom that I don't have.
Wouldn't life be super boring then?
Yeah. No, that would be super easy.
Yeah.
Yes. What's one lesson about disability, inclusion, and adaptation you think mostly about in the past from one generation to the next?
That's a really good question. I think that one lesson I'd like to pass from one generation to the next would be that we're lifelong students and we're also lifelong teachers. Mm-hmm. And we always remember that we're mentors and mentees for our entire lives, and we're always in a situation where we're not only learning and listening to everyone around us, but we're also in a mindset where we know that we also have to teach. Every time I leave home, I realize, and I have to tell myself this regularly, that I shouldn't be afraid to tell someone what's right or what's wrong, because not everyone is always present, and we always have to remain present.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's actually good. Yeah.
And when things get hard, when progress is slow, or the system just isn't working, how do you keep your emotional and mental rhythm steady?
That's good. My family, stay with my family, my community that you introduced me to, honestly, over here, that just puts me more sane, and I can lean on my family because they don't look at me any different. Everything, they make me feel, like normal. And then coming back to my community too, then I can talk about it because they can also relate and stuff like that. So stuff like that, yeah, just those two things mostly help a lot.
That's good. I think that even slow progress is progress, right? So even when things feel like they're not moving, they really are.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think about is that when things get hard and the system isn't working for me, I create my own system and I make it work for me.
Yeah, I see that too. You definitely do that one. That was cool on the first try too.
Every day feels like a battle. What do you do to fight for your peace, your body, your independence?
That's a good question. For my peace, I come to Access to work out, go down my crank cycle and forget about everything for a good 45 minutes. And it also helps with my independence, so I can get around the city more, the Bronx, all that, and just the community here. So they can always relate with us over here. Anything that goes on, whether it's something at home, the aid, accessorize, any of that, somebody got a similar story as you. So coming here really helps a lot to the Access Project. So
I can relate to those experiences. I joined Access also for the community, to meet new people and share experiences, because yes, Accessoride is how I get here, and it's a daily battle due to scheduling and the challenges that come with it.
yeah, the delays are annoying, I could imagine. So you gotta call early and they're still late, and then you always have to wait for people to get on and off too, which is very annoying, right?
It is. It's a challenge, but I push forward, and it motivates me to keep on going and to do what I need to do to be independent and get out there and meet new people.
Yes, that really hits home. I deal with assumptions a lot. Every day, somebody's just assuming I can or cannot do something. Do you have to deal with that?
I definitely relate to that in so many ways where people always want to speak for me, assume that I can or cannot do anything, but I use that opportunity to teach them that it's okay to ask questions, to learn about my disability, spina bifida, and to know that as a wheelchair user, you're still able to accomplish many things in life, even with adjustments that need to be made.
That's good. That's good. That's nice. I like how you like to teach other people stuff, because sometimes I don't even have that patience. And yeah, I have to just deal with people thinking I can't get in and out of car. Like they just look at you and just think you're stuck in a wheelchair, which is not true. We can do a lot of things. So, yes. Switch to side to side, and then up both our head next. Here. Beautiful. And don't forget to breathe. There we go. Nice. Side to side. Nice.
Wow, Alex, you make it look so easy.
Thank you, man. Thank you. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing good. I have a question for you. So I'm curious to know, how has adaptive fitness helped you reach your goals, especially since after your injury?
It helped me reach a lot of goals. It helped me be more confident in myself, be one with my body, and also just meeting a lot of people and stuff like that. It steered me over here to Access Project, where I met a whole bunch of people, and I also became a trainer to a lot of people and inspiration. So I just makes me feel better, and I also like to help people too a lot. So it made me feel a lot better, and I just like to see people happy. You know, what's up, Albert? Hit it, try it out yourself, Charlie.
Okay, sure. I'll give it my best shot.
Keep it nice and straight, okay?
How am I doing?
Yeah, warm up. Back it.
Oh, back to forward. Okay.
The other arm. There you go.
All right. I think I got it.
Yes. I got a question for you now, though.
I got an answer for you.
All right. How do you think accessibility helps even for able-bodied people like yourself?
Well, I think accessibility for fitness activities should be accessible for all individuals, regardless of disability or no disability at all. Inclusivity is so important. That's how we can all come together as human beings, is making things more inclusive for all and not just for some.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that one.
So how do you deal with situations that aren't quite adapted to you? You know, things that aren't really built for people with disabilities?
It's frustrating, but it gives me the opportunity to push forward. Literally, no pun intended, but it gives me the opportunity to push boundaries and work around whatever barriers I need to in order to accomplish what needs to be done.
I try to build around it as much as possible. Like, I do make adapted products for people. So like eating tools, cooking utensils, ramps, things like that. I find that a lot of locations aren't like normally too accessible. So I have to call restaurants, Google things, look up about pages, and I actually try to build stuff to help people make their places more accessible too.
I had an experience as well with going out dining where I researched, and unfortunately the establishment wasn't fully accessible.
Yeah.
So it would be convenient to have it be accessible. It would be one less of an obstacle that we have to go through in our daily lives due to being a wheelchair user and going through everything else that we need to be going through.
Yeah.
What is one goal, personal or collective, that if suddenly it would be available if the access barriers disappear tomorrow?
I would really love if every restaurant and place in New York City was forced to have an accessible entrance. Like, have a fine for anyone who's not accessible. We are the richest city I think we're one of the richest cities in the world. There's no reason for us to have to even question whether or not we can get into a restaurant or store or anything like that. That'd be a goal.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I just find it so frustrating when people misunderstand me and also misunderstand how my wheelchair works and how I use it. Do you ever have that problem, Patrick?
That's a very good question, Ione. During the height of COVID, I had picked up a new exercise, manually wheeling myself around the mall, just for my quality of life, just to keep my strength up because we couldn't go outside, we couldn't go no place. But then people would assume just because I'm wheeling myself, or if my aide was right next to me, that she had to be pushing me. They felt like I couldn't do it by myself. They didn't understand that I was doing it for the struggle, that I wanted to push myself. There were times I had a 40-pound weighted vest on, and they would say, wow, he's struggling. How come his aide is not helping him? But they would have took the time and asked me, like, why is he struggling so bad? I'll tell them, listen, I don't have a big sign that says I have a 40-pound weighted vest on. That's why I'm struggling. That's why she's walking. She helps me when I need it, so don't worry about it. It's all good. And Ione, there's a stigma. How do you respond when people make assumptions or treat you differently because of your disability?
I get that all the time. I'm so glad you asked that because the biggest challenge I have is my voice. So people assume they can't understand me. So they'll be talking to me and they're like, sure, not listening to a word I'm saying. So every now and then I like to have fun with them at their expense. I'm like, the blue cow jumped over the purple moon. And they're like, Then they're like, wait, what are you talking about? I said, see, he wasn't even listening to what I was saying. And that's how I deal with them. What do you do?
You know what? I wish people would just take the time, get to know us, stop and ask some questions. You know our names. Because I met a nice, interesting couple during my little wheeling myself with the mall walkers, and his name was Raymond. He was a vet, and he would say, always come up to me and say, you have the heart of a lion. He put an L sign up. He said, I see you struggling, but you have the heart of a lion. I have a sweatshirt and a t-shirt with that logo, Heart of a Lion, because that's how I am when it comes to this disease. People just take the time to know us and learn our struggle and see why we're pushing forward.
That's right. Mess around and find out.
Ready?
Let's do this.
Hi, Mama. I've noticed that even though we have the same disability, people tend to treat us differently based on how we move. What have people gotten wrong about you?
Hi, my penny. What people got wrong about me with my disability, which is cerebral palsy, is that they assume that I can't walk or I can't clean up or have kids, and I do it all. So when they are shocked when they see that I get up out of my chair and stuff and like, what? You can walk? I said, yeah, it's not pretty, but I can do it. I can do a lot of things.
Indeed you can.
Well, my penny, my questions to you. How do you handle when people make assumptions about your body, your ability, and your independence?
I just brush it off, to be honest, unless we're talking about assumptions in the home care space. Because a lot of the times in the home care space, our caregivers can make assumptions about our level of ability when they shouldn't be making those assumptions when the person they're caregiving for knows what they can and can't do for themselves.
I get where you're coming from, Penny, because they do assume that a lot and they don't listen, especially to the person that is needing the help and know what help they need. So I understand that very well.
Yeah. You ready, Mama?
Yes, I am, my Penny. Go. Oh, go ahead, reach for it. Uh-huh. Oh, get it, girl. Oh, that arm's strong. Yeah. Boom.
What's up, Dutch?
Hey, what's happening?
Oh, not much, man.
So adaptive sports have changed the way society and people view disability and how we see ourselves. Which one way being in the ring or being involved in boxing has allowed you to change your views on the way you deal with things in life?
Sure.
Outside of the ring.
Okay, good question, George. So yeah, see, they parallel each other, right? In the world of adaptive boxing, you have adversity, right? Conditioning, training, and then you have your opponent that was to stop everything that you want. They're in your way. They want the same thing as you. As in able about my regular life, each one I'm disabled, right? So I have to start at the same start each time I'm disabled, and my adversity is the standard the world sets for us, right? They're telling me that I can't do this or this is where you should be, based off of how I look or what you've been poorly educated, right? And that's my battle. That's my opponent. That's something I deal with every day. That's an inner struggle that I have to battle because it's their words, but I carry. Right? I go through my life like, okay, if they say I can't do this in the world, things I can't, then that's how I should be because I want to fit in. We're all going to be, we want to fit in, but I'm unhappy.
So how do you show up?
How do I show up? I push myself. I do it in adaptive boxing. So I started with sports. I speak for me, right? Adaptive boxing changed my perspective, how I deal with life and how I tackle obstacles. At one point, I was very overweight. I was like 246 pounds and depressed. My relationship was in the dumps. I was unemployed. I had no income, no independence. I was completely dependent on the government and other people. And that was the stereotype of a person with a disability. I fit right in. And to break that, I had to change my mindset. And in order to change my mindset and how I saw myself, I had to actually work on me and do that work. And that came with discipline. I changed my diet. I started going to the gym, started training myself. I started feeling really good. Started meeting other people with disabilities and seeing that they're accomplishing goals and they're facing struggles like me. So I'm like, okay, I'm not alone here. You know, it's not just me against the world. So that gave me the inspiration to go forward. And next thing you know, I started going to adaptive boxing, started working with my peers, and doors just opened from there. My confidence, my self-esteem. I stopped accepting no. And if there's something that people say I can't do, I figure out a way to do it, and it may be adaptive, but it can still be done. And that's the temporary care.
I think you said many important things, but the one important thing that you said is that it starts within it. It never starts on the outside. The outside may force you in a position where you feel like you need to act, right? That it always starts with it. But we always have to take a moment, take a deep breath, and reflect.
George, no, I think people are starting to get it, but not fully. What do you think still gets overlooked when people ask about adaptive athletes or inclusive fitness spaces?
So I have to reel it back just a little bit. So I wear many different hats, right? But I started off, like you, as a person with a disability that was physically way out of shape. I had to be. I was at 350. I had to work my way down from 350. But when I finally made the decision to get myself physically fit, a lot of other things changed, right? Emotionally, I was in a better place. Mentally, I was in a better place. And then I started doing more than just athletics. That was just the starting point. That was a springboard. I ended up creating nonprofits, creating for-profits. So I'm also an entrepreneur. So I think the one thing that we're still missing in this day and age, or that society forgets about the disability community, are the numbers. Worldwide, we're 1.3 billion strong. Nationwide, as a CDC, the numbers came back for 2024 just recently, we're over 70 million strong in the disability community. You know what that translates to in dollars? That's a lot of money. So what society tends to forget is that we're a market, and we're really and truly a market to be reckoned, right? So when you have a person or a developer or a restaurateur or someone who's developing a shopping center, when they're creating that space, they're not thinking about us because they don't realize that we're a market, right? That they could tap into what we are. So I think that's the one thing that I'd love to get across nationwide and worldwide is that you can't forget us, because when you forget us, you leave money on the table.
That's right. So what do you believe should be a part of a larger conversation around adaptive sports and disability?
There's only one group on this in this universe is called humankind, right? There's only one humankind. I think what people need to continue to talk about is how to create spaces that's for humankind and not just for people who are disabled, not disabled. Everything and anything that's created on this planet should be created for everyone to be able to utilize and enjoy, because we're all equal. Whether we're pushing, whether we're walking, whether we're using a walker, a cane, whether we're able to see, not see, whether we can hear, not hear, we're all equal.
George, you got my goal. Appreciate you.
Crank it up, crank it up. In one word,
Get loud.
what fuels you when accessibility is denied? Arlene. Loud.
Perseverance.
Out.
Help.
Inclusion. Compensation.
Three. Rights.
Action.
Now in 2 words. No, I'm kidding. Keep it going, keep it going.
Competition.
Help. Perseverance.
Gain.
Rights.
Access. Inclusion. And hope.